You're quite an elusive character. So we're very glad to have you
Mhm.
here. And I must thank you for coming on, for breaking the seal of anonymity. If that's I'm from Lincolnshire, obviously, as we've now outed. There's no hiding my inability to speak. But born in North Lincolnshire, and one thing that kind of stuck with me when I was kind of looking into your world and your life is the fact that you were. I found a little ditty about how you used to create toys while you were kind of
Mm.
with your working. Your parents were working, and you created toys out of the
Yeah.
things you had to hand. Now that sort of struck me. I was like, that feels like a genesis point, but of someone of not dissimilar age to me. I'm slightly more older gentleman than you, I have to admit, and you're the young pup of the conversation. But what toys were you creating? And do you think that creation of those toys opened up your mind to the creation of your own games and ideas that have now flowed into your burgeoning game catalogue?
Oh, absolutely. That was me making games without a computer, without a doubt. I was making board games, I was making card games, I was making dice games, I was making things out of cardboard, and just anything I could do to. I was just being as creative as I could with the tools I had access to at that time, which wasn't a computer. And so, but when you look back, you can see that I used the exact same statistics, even the exact same mathematical logic about how those statistics are applied to the wrestling games, because it was popularity, strength, agility, stamina, and attitude and things like this. And so the building blocks were there, and I had everything I needed except a computer, and then that had to slot in at a later point.
I'm excited and disappointed by that because I thought you would wheel in like a Millennium Falcon made out of cardboard at this moment, or maybe Matt
Oh,
Tracker's Thunderhawk from Mask.
I can show you one thing I made. This is a Lemmings game. I don't know why I call it Lemmings. It's a Lemmings game I made at school with ball bearings, and you had a magnet that picked up a ball bearing, and you had to move that around a level, and just things like that. Like in my imagination, this is a computer game because it's Lemmings, but
Yeah.
it's practical and it's magnetic and it's wooden. And so I
One
would
thing
just
I
do
would
things like
say,
that.
Matt, for the audio listeners, you just shown me, quite honestly, is probably one of the best things I could ever have created, even as an adult. And this is your childhood dalliance with
Yeah,
wood.
you could say
That looks
wood, painted, and it's got plasticine holding it all together, and ball bearings, and then there would be a magnet that I pull around it.
and I see you've
It's
stuck
quite
on
poetic because
I see you've
sorry.
stuck on almost like a games review score on the top of it as well from what Games Master or
Yeah, oh
Games
yeah,
or
there's me. Yeah, there's me willing it
91%.
into existence. 91%. It's the best review I've ever had, and it's for a wooden box.
That is joyous. You see, now that's changed the pantheon of where I thought you were at. I thought you were building maybe Castle Grayskull or maybe Thunderbird's Tracy Island, but it
Oh no,
transpires
it
you were
wasn't
building these
toys. No, it
games.
was games. It was like I'll take a board game. Like WWF would bring out its stereotypical board game, and my brother and I would pull it to bits and make it better than it was supposed to be. Not as tame as it was as they made it. And you could do anything. It was more freedom. There was more happening. It was more authentic. So that was just a recurring theme. We'd take something basic and kind of mod it. It would be the board game equivalent of modding a mainstream game. And then that's where you learn what entertains people, what makes something good or bad. It's a real education, and I recommend it to any aspiring game developers.
When you first started to explain there about the toys that you were making or the games, the board games you were making, which I think is a better fit of a description for the things that you're
Yeah,
creating, you mentioned some of the stats and how they sort of
yeah.
contributed towards the character's journey in the game. Was there an element of the sort
Mm.
of burgeoning Games Workshop books that came out, the Fighting Fantasy series? Did that ever occur in your childhood?
It was Talisman. Have you heard of Talisman?
I have heard of Talisman yet.
Yeah, my brother and I used to play that board game, and I suppose that did set me off on the idea of a character card with attributes, special attributes. They even had a gold treasury, and yeah, there's quite a lot of overlap with the just all the entertainment I was exposed to as a child, and just it all kind of congregates into my own, and then I put my own spin on that, and then because there's nothing new under the sun. Nobody's inventing anything. We're just twisting. We're like magpies, taking everything we've ever been exposed to and then creating the illusion of an invention, but it's just evolution.
The wrestling's obviously, you mentioned it there a couple of times, and that's obviously been quite an important part of your library as you developed, and seemingly your whole sort of interest in the entertainment industry. What came first? Did you get a video game first, or did you get exposed to WWF first, or was it World of Sport?
It was close. It was a Hulk Hogan. Well, first it was an Ultimate Warrior trading card in the playground, and I'm thinking, who's this? What is this? Then it was a Hulk Hogan video. So I'm exposed to these larger than life bodybuilders, and that's the gateway drug. Then I'm exposed to Bret Hart, and I see what it looks like at its best, and I'm a fan of the technical stuff. And so at that point, the games come in 1992. That WWF WrestleMania for the SNES. That's the first game we bought, and then never stopped from then on, really.
Okay, so was that your first home computer, or did you have? I grew up in a time where consoles were a little bit out there, especially in Lincolnshire. So I had an Atari ST. Some of my friends had Spectrums before that, and I think my first computer, apart from a Pong clone that my parents got bored of and let me fiddle around with, was a VIC-20, which to a modern kid probably doesn't even put anything on the screen that even resembles a game. So did you go straight into console, or did you have those home computers?
No, our evolution was Atari 2600 was the first thing we'd ever been exposed to about the age of 5.
Yeah.
Then we got an Amstrad CPC, and then an Amiga 500, then a Super Nintendo, and then it's off to the races with Nintendo consoles pretty much from then on.
So at that point, me and you got side by side and went on that train. We devoted to.
I think so.
Until I can't remember when it was, when I kind of fell out of love with them, I suppose. Off the back of the N64, I went and got a Dreamcast. I just wanted something a little bit. I was fed up of supporting what felt like the underdog. And then I went and got the world's biggest underdog. So there's the logic of a mid-Lincolnshire man for you. So that wrestling, obviously in the UK, unless you had Sky, it was quite hard to get hold of and enjoy and understand. So where did you first sort of stumble across it on the regular?
Yeah, that's the funny thing, because I never even had Sky until recently. I never had Sky. So my friend used to record it on his Sky setup, and he used to share the videos with us on the Monday after a pay-per-view or whatever it was called back then.
Oh my!
And so it's really amazing. It was all the second-hand information. Looking back, it's a miracle I even knew that much about it, because I only watched the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. And looking back, that was a very meager diet to sustain yourself on and be a huge fan of something. Whereas now you've got so many hours per week, which is every bit as entertaining as we had once or twice a year. So, looking back, I can't imagine how it happened, but it did.
I wonder if we jumped in a time machine and took the latest Monday Night Raw on a VHS, so from today or this week, all the way back to you then, and showed you it. Obviously, not only as games developed and technology has developed, wrestling has developed as an art form and a medium as well. And I wonder quite what we would think of that then. Do you think it'd blow our mind, and just an average Monday Night Raw would make WrestleMania feel like a car boot?
It's fashionable to criticize it now and say it's not as good as it used to be, but your mind would be blown if you saw what they're doing, the production quality, and things like that. If you saw Roman Reigns 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, you'd still be every bit as impressed, I think. And as much as it's fun to make fun of WWE, we're all fans of it at the end of the day. In my corner of the industry, we just enjoy taking shots at the big boys, but standing on the shoulders of giants. But we're all fans at the end of the day. It's just a gimmick.
You're right. So trying to understand your console history. So you went to your SNES, then I presume the N64, and then you loyally then jumped to the GameCube?
No, actually, I was wrong to say it was Nintendo from then on, because I actually had this. I went back and forth with N64 and PlayStation. At that point, I couldn't afford to own both, so I actually had the PlayStation first, sold it to get an N64, And then some of my friends at school started getting some good PlayStation games. And so I sold my N64 to get the PlayStation. And then I sold my PlayStation to get another N64 in 1998 when GoldenEye and NWO, WCW, whatever it was called, Revenge.
Yeah.
When those games came out, I switched back to the N64. And then I didn't actually move on to the GameCube. I never owned a console again until the Switch, to be honest, because at that point I had started making games by 1999, 2000. By 2000, I'd started making my own games, and then I had no time to play other people's games or even the resources to buy them because I was at university and I was struggling. And so it wasn't. I didn't get a console again until the Switch.
Wow. Okay. Well, so to get into that, Manchester University, a Bachelor of Science in Video Games and Computers at Salford University. Now, that is not a throwaway thing, Matt. That's actually quite the honor. Do you look back on those uni days fondly? Talk to me through that.
It was strange. The strange thing about it is it was the first course of its kind ever taught in England. There was one in Scotland, but that was the first one in England. And so it was the first course of its kind ever attempted. And that there were pros and cons to that because it was the blind leading the blind. To be honest, they had no idea what they were doing. So on one hand, it was exciting to say, I go to university for 3 years to study games. And on the other hand, it was not fit for purpose. It didn't produce graduates who could make games by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure it has evolved now into serving that purpose, but then it was a lot of teething problems and it wasn't as good as it sounds.
Okay, because since then, Manchester's become sort of recognised as a stronghold for sort of producing the next wave of game developers through their universities. We did something last year. We went to a nightlife event called Format that was based around games, and that also had a backing to it of some of the universities and things with the organizer and quite how that world is developed is actually really quite nice and special. And the fact that it's kind of taking a kid fresh out of sixth form, one would imagine, and throwing them into the deep end. But I think there's a lot of mysteries about sort of game development, especially for studios, where you think you're going to be lying back in a chair with a beret on and drawing something, and it feels like really nice. There's a lot of crunch involved, and it's not necessarily the nicest, sometimes not the nicest place to work. So you kind of skipped all that and decided to make games on your own. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think you had some immediate success in 98 with your own website and a Hardy Boys game.
2000. Yeah, in August or September 2000, the exact moment I was about to go to university, I had some overnight success on a wrestling website. I uploaded a game to them, and it went out to about 15,000 people. And overnight, I was waking up to emails saying, "Let's have more of this. This is really interesting. It's a really interesting way of engaging with the product," because I was making games every week. So it was like a weekly TV show. I would react to the product in real time within a week. And so it was this really topical brand of game development, small little games. It was a good education for me. And so that's how I got my start. And then within a year of that, I had enough support to have my own website and never looked back from there, really.
How did that evolve? So you would watch Monday Night Raw or something along those lines, and then you would kind of put those events and activities into that game, into an update for the game.
It's a funny thing again, because at the university, again, I didn't have access to Sky. And again, I was borrowing tapes from some guy at university who did have Sky. And I was watching clips on like the internet, their version of WWE.com back 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I would consume the latest news and then make a game about the big news story of the week, whether it's Steve Austin getting run over by a car, who did it, I'm going to make a whodunit about that. If it's Triple H and a love triangle with Kurt Angle, I'm going to make a game about a love triangle between those two wrestlers. Just one aspect of one product and just kind of blow it up, turn the volume up on it and try and entertain people, try and make people laugh. And then after a year of doing that, they suddenly became a bit bigger, and I was suddenly making a full 2D wrestling game from beginning to end.
So I've got some sort of stop off points along the way here. Wrestling Encore. What can you tell us about that?
Hmm.
Because there's certain sort of, as I've been researching you, I always feel quite stalkerish when I'm researching people because it feels a little bit invasive, to be honest. But Wrestling Encore, that was maybe your first stepping stone on the way to Wrestling Empire, which is where this whole conversation is taking us.
Well, no, it starts in 2004 with Wrestling Empire 2004.
But that's with the
Then
M.
in 2006, in 2006, there's Wrestling Encore, as in come back again, do
Yeah,
another one.
yeah.
And then in 2008, there's another Wrestling Empire. And then there was the 3D one on mobiles. And then there was Wrestling Empire on Switch.
Because I don't know, obviously within your Wrestling Empire, which is the only one I've played and absolutely love, there's a booking element to it as well. Were you a fan of? I've talked about this and I could never remember the name. I feel like it's CZW or something like that. There was a spreadsheet wrestling management game that existed online. Do you recall that?
I'm aware
Please
of
say
Promotion
yes.
Wars no, it does ring a bell, but I'm not sure about the online thing. I'm just aware of text games. 20 years ago, there was a lot of text games about
It was a text
booking
game.
your own promotion.
That's
like
correct.
the championship manager of wrestling.
Of
I was aware of
wrestling.
those.
Did you get to play those?
No, I played one on the Amiga way back in the day.
My goodness, what was
it was
that
called
like?
it was called Professional. It wasn't that bad actually. It was called Professional Wrestling Masters, based on Professional Football Masters, because we used to play. My brother and I used to play a football management game called Professional Football Masters. It was a really good text version of it. And then there was it was quite graphical actually. It was like a turn-based wrestling game, and it was quite
Wow.
in depth. It was really quite impressive for its time. And you created your own characters with graphics, and you chose moves in a turn-based kind of format, not in an action-based format. And that was technically that was the first time I saw a wrestling game like that. But when I did it myself, it was because I was a fan of Championship Manager and the football management games, and I thought a lot of us had the same idea at the same time, which is, why isn't there a wrestling version of this? And then I took it in a more graphical route where you actually are seeing what's happening, you actually are doing what's happening, and that was my priority. And others went more in depth on the management side of things.
Okay, so let's indulge me. Let's fast forward to Wrestling Empire, and you know that's the game of the moment. I think you mentioned when we were talking that it's well today as the moment that we record, but when this episode goes live, it will be its 3-year, 3-day anniversary. But let's just say it's its 3-year anniversary. How far before that? Obviously, it released 3 years ago. How long were you in production before you brought the game out?
It was the whole of 2020 from beginning to end. I wanted to hit the anniversary of No Mercy, which was November 2020. I wanted to bullseye that exact anniversary for the pure poetry of it. But I didn't realize how long Nintendo's approval process is. So I finished it at the end of October on Halloween in 2020. And they said, no, we're not releasing this until January. So I wasn't used to that delay. But it turned out to be a good thing, because I used the extra time to do a lot of marketing, and I got a lot of viral trailers going, and I spent the whole of December just promoting it like a movie. And that turned out to be for the better. So Nintendo taught me a lot about doing things properly, taking your time, slow down, don't be in a rush. Because it did have a bigger impact in January than it would have had if I rushed it out in November.
All of this fever dream bottled up in 1998 got packaged into your brain somehow. I'm stealing your thunder here, but somehow you arrived at the same conclusions I did when you were making Wrestling Empire off the back of these late 90s N64 video games. It's amazing you've managed to capture my dream, and I thank you eternally for that, because this is everything I ever wanted in a wrestling video game, and you have delivered. Can you talk to me about where some of these ideas came from and how they ended up forming the backbone of what's made Wrestling Empire what it is today, with the Rome mode and all the other good stuff?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I felt exactly the same way. I was sat there 25 years ago, and I would kind of like exaggerate to my brother. I'd look at the latest wrestling game in the magazines and I'd say, oh, this one's got it's going to have a really good career mode with a schedule full of stuff. And there's going to be backstage meetings and there's going to be contract negotiations. And it's kind of like half lying and half kind of tapping into what I'm actually going to be doing in the future. It's really kind of like this thin line between past and future. And I was kind of breaching it. And my brain was just on fire with lying about what games contain, but actually acting out what I believe they should. And then I just kind of willed it into existence through that sheer enthusiasm, because I wanted to do the exact same things you wanted to do. And I just didn't stop until I made it happen.
Wow. Okay. So you're creating Wrestling Empire. You've got the idea for how you want the wrestlers to interact in the ring. Was there any sort of idea within that you, because I have, in talking about the Wrestling Empire on previous shows and how I've come across it and found it, I've described it as a little bit wonky. I think Nintendo Life has famously called it a little bit wonky. That's not quite right. It's the openness and the fluidity that does produce kind of sometimes a little bit of a jarring effect, but I would not trade that for anything, because the flow of the matches, being caught midair, having my move reverse and it turn into a chain wrestling extravaganza. No other game gives us that. Was that something that you were very keen on implementing from the start?
Yeah, I'm as aware of the flaws in my games as anybody else. The only difference is I know why they're there. I know the trade-off that was necessary to entertain you in that way. If you wanted the game to be perfect and not buggy and broken, it would have to run on rails like the mainstream games do and prevent anything awkward ever happening.
Yeah.
But I knew that it was worth it to shoot for the stars and land on a cloud, to give you the freedom to make mistakes, to give myself the freedom to make mistakes, to reach those moments, because they would never happen if we're looking for that polished, pristine, sterile experience. You have to have the freedom to make mistakes. So a lot of people take you can take the freedom I give you and you can have a magical experience, and you can say, this is magical, it allows magical things to happen. Or you can take that freedom and do absurd things and say, this game is absurd, it allowed me to do absurd things, the person who made it must be absurd. So I feel a bit unfair, because that's the thanks I get for giving you freedom, for giving you the freedom to entertain yourself, is people will turn around and say, look, he gave us the freedom to do stupid things, he's a stupid person.
You gave us the freedom. You're definitely not that, because, I can't even finish a crossword and you've produced what I would call arguably the greatest wrestling game of all time. No other game captures the anachronistic craziness of wrestling. You never know, in terms of the WWE or AEW, whatever else is kicking around these days, really what is going to happen next. And it's that edge of the seat scenario that grips you into it as an entertainment medium. It's that excitement of what can happen. And you talk about sterile.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sterileness in the games. It's kind of like, this is how you have to play it, and these are the only ways you can get out of this move, and this is the only way you can progress from this to this to this. You can't do that, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. And we play these games within these rigid guidelines of what they've set us. But yours is the only game that I've played where you can be walking around backstage and somebody comes up to you and then it all kicks off and you're trying to go to your hotel room, but someone grabs hold of you and wants to ask you if you can help them. Can you nobble this guy backstage? So, and then, the interference in the ring, or I've had something happen where I didn't, and you can maybe explain this to me, where my stats maybe didn't quite work correctly in terms of doing a move and it botches. But wrestling has got botched moments in it. So it's the ultimate real life wrestling simulator that sort of portrays wrestling as a sport, but also as a form of entertainment, where these wrestlers producing almost like a testosterone-filled weekly soap opera that people buy into. Your game is the only game that's been able to illustrate that in a way that has me always clicking next. And I go through the newspaper and I'm like, oh, come on, what's going to happen next? I'm excited. Where can my character go next? The way that you've incorporated the different federations within, and then obviously you can go from wrestling school, you can have a contract negotiation, which I love, by the way. All I ever want is creative control, so they don't mess my character up. And that seems to be the most egregious request of any booker in the game.
Well, it is in real life. It is in real life, isn't it? If someone goes up to Triple H and says, "I want full control of my character," there's only about 3 people in the whole promotion that will get that thing. So it does annoy a lot of gamers, but it is true to the sport.
It is very true to the sport. But the wrestling school evolution and the other federations and the way they work almost within the database of constantly providing that background data to enable that to build almost like a realistic backdrop to the whole of the pantheon you're in, not just the federation you represent at that time. Was that a hard thing to compute, or are we talking a spreadsheet, a database in the background that's crunching those numbers?
No, it's very easy. It's a simple number. They have a promotion, 1 to 9, 1 to 10, and that number dictates which pool they go in. The only hard thing about it is in the real world, WWE doesn't own the rights to any other promotions, so they can only depict the Raw, SmackDown, NXT rosters. So what independents have is that opportunity to create a larger world, because we're not making a glorified piece of merchandise, we're making an immersive simulation, whereas they are limited to promoting their brand. And that means that there's a lot of problems with that. That means they can never criticize somebody. They can never depict this guy as being truly talentless. They can never depict this guy as earning less than that guy, because it raises a lot of political questions for them. But for us as outsiders, we have that freedom to have a real hard look at the behind the scenes stuff without any sanitization. So it comes back to that sterile conversation again. They make sterile games, whereas we make those rough around the edges kind of games.
And we thank you for it. Within Wrestling Empire, and people listening now, if they haven't gone and downloaded it immediately, especially since I've been feverishly rabbiting on about it for so long, it also allows you to depict what I would call the sort of darker elements of the wrestling industry. There's the steroids, which I've always said no to, but I'm always kind of intrigued. It's a game. I don't know why I'm so like, no, I'm clean. I don't know. I'm so obsessed with that.
Moral decision,
the painkillers and things like that. And that's a darker side, an underbelly to the industry that maybe is around, maybe is around these days. And who knows? I wouldn't like to get caught up in that. But the fact that you've woven that into the fabric of Wrestling Empire should be applauded, I think. What helped you make that decision to incorporate those sort of more darker life elements?
Well, I have a simple saying, which is, if it happens in wrestling, it happens in Empire. If you don't want me to put that in a game, don't put it on my timeline in real life. Don't put premature deaths in front of me. If you don't want me to put premature deaths in front of you in a game, I'm holding up a mirror to an entire industry, and there's not much that I leave out, and there's not much that I would even consider leaving out. It's and I find it quite funny, because sometimes my games are dismissed as being gratuitously violent, when I'm the one that surrounds death with great ritual, with funerals, with memorials, with tributes. Whereas people can slaughter people in GTA 5, and that's hailed as a work of art. But I'm gratuitously violent for making you miss a character, making your heart sink when that music drops. Oh, something's happened. A guy's gone. A name has gone forever. And we're going to have a funeral for him, and we're going to have a memorial service. I'm the bad guy for doing that. I'm the tasteless guy for doing that. But people can get massacred in other games, and everyone thinks that's high art.
That is an interesting viewpoint, and I would be inclined to agree. I think there's always been a disconnect in video games, and I think sex has this disconnect as well. You can kill thousands of people in a video game. It's fine. It's a teen rating. You show one corner of an areoli, it's banned. And how is that dangerous? Yet teaching kids that shooting guns is okay and is fine, it's for teens, whereas the corner of a nipple, which is something that a kid has been fed since he was born, is dangerous.
I found it especially frustrating, because I had a lot of trouble with Google. They would censor everything I did, or flag it up. Every little thing I did, like this woman's blouse is too tight. You've got to take that down and take that screenshot down. on the same website, they had Game of Thrones having incestuous deaths and bloody red weddings and stuff like this on the same like media streaming thing. And they thought my games were as bad as those TV shows. So it seems they get a pass for being high art. They can do whatever they want. Games have to be whiter than white, purer than pure. And if you even, I couldn't do 1/10 of the things that they do in a TV show.
Do you think
I've already got like an 18 rating. I've got an 18 rating for my school game, I think. Just a game about school and they get bullied a little bit in the corridors. 18. And then if the same thing on TV or in a movie, oh, that's fine. That's got more credence than what you do.
I've always seen video games as my generation's ever living VHS in a way, if that makes sense. It's our sort of medium to enjoy entertainment for our generation. We've seen the full turn. Our generation is the ones that kind of, I know there were early games running in scientific labs somewhere where they'd made sort of very basic dungeon crawlers on 3D paper and things like that. But, you know, we've seen the evolution from Pong to Atari 2600 all the way through. And we understand that as an entertainment medium. Heck, even the industry recognizes it as an entertainment medium because, you know, these games are classed as the biggest form of entertainment in terms of revenue going. But to some people, and I don't know who they are, but certainly the people in charge tend to view video games, consoles, and things as toys. Do you think that's where the disconnect has happened? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just this fear of the unknown. Like with the language as well. I actually swear a lot in real life, but I've never sworn in my games particularly. The language is very tame, and it still goes right up into the mature category very quickly for crude language because I said I'm going to kick your ass or something. And so, yeah, it's very frustrating that I don't have the same tools that other entertainers have in their mediums yet. And yeah,
I have to admit, the first time I saw like in Wrestling Empire, sometimes on the build up to a big match, you have like an interview or promo. And, there was one time where some guy sort of swore or something similar, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't expect," and it sat me back.
Oh, right, yeah, it's a one-off. Yeah.
Like, oh,
yeah, because it's so rare.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, he really means this," but it actually kind of contributed.
Yeah, exactly. It had a bit of impact.
The narrative in my brain. One thing I would say about Wrestling Empire as well as to kind of give it a bit of a pass, if I'm honest with you, when you're wrestling and you botch a move and you really injure somebody, and or, you know, I was playing with a game in the subway and I sort of wondered if I could back throw someone onto the track. A train arrived and then it was in the newspaper that he had been killed. And it actually resonated quite deeply. It was like, oh, actually, that didn't feel great. Yeah. And sometimes in a match, when you sort of consistently pile drive someone into concrete and they kind of go to get up and then can't, and then you kind of, if you've played Wrestling Empire enough, you kind of know that you've overdone it and they're dead, and it still leaves this quite sort of dark feeling that I haven't really experienced before. It's almost like you've taken this person's trust and abused it. As a wrestler, I think there's this sort of level of respect and care and interaction has been demonstrated quite well from you, especially with the stats that contribute towards attitude about whether people will get in the ring with you because you could be deemed dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm
glad to hear that, because that's exactly what I was trying to achieve, is what you said. Yeah, that tug on your heartstrings, shocked you just that little bit, that there's something happening here that's deeper than the most gratuitous games. Yeah.
And there's something that, although they're my actions, like if people don't know, and again, I really implore people to go check this game out anywhere and everywhere they can, but there's something about these characters, the way you've designed them and drawn them and the artwork. We've talked about the sort of low polygonal sort of style, harking to No Mercy, which has enabled you to have this freedom of control. But unlike other wrestling games, you come through the arena, you pull the taunt stick and you do the intro and you breathe life. It's almost like the game makes me feel more like a puppeteer, like I'm controlling a marionette. than anything I've ever played before. It's the level of interaction that you can, if you're really mad with someone, you've been having a feud, I come through the curtain and I hit run. I'm getting in there and I'm in the ring and I'm like, come on, let me get him, let me get hold of him. And I want to teach him a lesson. Equally so, when you're having a big match, or you know that it's that big moment, you can really sort of stretch it out on the intro, put your hand up, maybe grab a weapon, turn to the crowd. You can, and again, there's so much in there. I do not know how you on your own have found the time. You can have the belt around your waist. You can take it off. You can hold it up. You can put the strap over your shoulder if you want to. If you've got two, you can have one around your waist and one on your shoulder. It's unbelievable, Matt.
So my priority is to give wrestling fans the freedom to entertain themselves from the minute you walk through the curtain to the minute you walk back through it. Because if you don't insult their intelligence, they'll show you how intelligent they are. You know, if you don't insult a gamer's intelligence, they will show you what entertainment looks like. And so that's all I've ever done, is give people the tools to entertain themselves. And some people get it, some people don't. It hits people either way. You either, okay, I get this, I'm in control of this. It's kind of my responsibility for what happens next. Some people kind of like, they don't want that responsibility, and they think, oh, this game is awkward. It's making me do awkward things. It's making me taunt in an awkward way when I walk to the ring. Some people appreciate it and some people don't, but that's my priority, is that freedom, and I'll never stop banging that drum.
An update dropped recently, 1.6.2, new arena. A match type I never thought I'd see. The dog collar match, flooded arenas. It keeps on coming. May I ask, what's next? What's your dream of where this game goes?
Well, the strange thing is, it has nothing to do with wrestling, because these are all things that are coming from my other projects. The wrestling aspect doesn't actually have enough support to come as far as it has. This is all me developing games about school and prison and zombies and superheroes, and passing it all back chunk by chunk to wrestling to see what happens. It's this crossover, this cross-pollination. And vice versa, the wrestling is passing features forward to the adventure games that have never been seen in adventure games before. We've never seen this above-average combat system in an adventure game before. We've never seen this character customization or these character dynamics in an adventure game before. So there's this cross-pollination where the wrestling makes the adventure games better and the adventure games make the wrestling games better. And it's a wild ride in any direction, and that's the way it's unfolding. And there's more to come. Like when I release a prison game and it has court cases, those court cases will come to wrestling, and there'll be court cases about there'll be court cases about that guy you threw off the subway onto the train. That's going to be a court case. There'll be court cases in the booking mode when you infringe someone's gimmick. And so there's these layers every year. You think you've seen it all, but every year there'll be a new layer of complexity, of sophistication, and it'll bring out the best in the old and bring out the best in the new. And hopefully it'll be this kind of like symbiotic relationship where they all blossom together.
One question:
but the industry doesn't actually want me to do it.
Really?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of pushback from Apple specifically. They think I'm spamming the store. I've had about 3 warnings for spamming the store
because of your updates.
Because I'm recycling features. So if I put something from the school game in the wrestling game, they say you're spamming your users. And I'm like, they don't sound like they're being spammed. They seem quite happy with it. But they're trying to create a quality experience. They're trying to prevent people uploading cookie cutter games. They don't want to damage the credibility of their store by having a load of nonsense. And I've got kind of swept up in that net a handful of times, and it's not really fair, because I'm sharing assets in a very productive way that makes everything better for everybody. It's a win-win. It's a 360 win, and it's been a long fight to try and convince the industry that this shared universe is a good thing and not a bad thing.
I would find that quite insulting, because has Apple ever been on Apple's store? Because it's full of absolute trash.
I had to argue there was a double standard, because they said this wrestling game is too similar to that war game. I've got a war game that has a map, and I've got a wrestling game that has a map, and they said they're too similar because they both have maps. And then I said, look at all the Angry Birds iterations, Transformers Angry Birds, this Angry Birds, that Angry Birds. They're almost identical. And they're allowed on the store, but they kind of like, they picked an easy fight with indies and try and give us a hard time. But I had to stand my ground and kind of argue my case, but I have to do it on an annual basis.
That seems crazy. I think a lot of digital storefronts lack curation, but it seems like they try and make up for curation at the beginning by bringing you at the back end, and that seems
because we're talking about games. So they did it with the Super City game, the superhero game. 7 years after I made it, they sent me a thing saying you've got to take this down now because you're spamming people. So that we should have had this conversation 7 years ago about how I'm spamming people with games that have 10 million downloads, and it's just nonsense. So you can win when you challenge it, but it's exhausting to have to challenge it. I'd rather not.
I've got this is a personal indulgence, forgive me, based on something you said earlier about the court cases and things coming. I've been had several times by in Wrestling Empire. I've been a champion, and my career has ended with one division, and I've then been signed up to somebody else's. And in the paper, it's like, oh, he appeared on this federation with the other federation's belt. And I'm like, where am I meant to put that belt, Matt, before I leave? Do I have to walk in the office and throw it on the floor, or?
Yeah, I think you should have done the right thing. Like Bret Hart, you should have dropped the title. You should have deliberately lost it. So it throws up the. No, I don't seriously expect people to do that. But in real life, that is what they're expected to do. That's why MJF lost the title to sell the fact that he's supposed to be gone by now in January 2024. You're supposed to drop the belt on the way out, and it's just a little reference to real life about how people do show up.
That makes sense.
It is actually a legitimate strategy in the booking game. If you see a guy's contract going down to 1 week, you really should be getting the belt off him, because in the renegotiations, he will either leave with the belt and damage your brand, or he will charge you more money. So there is this legitimate business strategy of keeping the belt off someone who is up in the air, because they will weaponize it against you.
That makes sense. And I also, I don't know why I didn't think of that, but now you've said it out loud, it's completely obvious to me. And it kind of chimes in with another scenario I quite like. I kind of end up going, I've mastered the controls now, and I feel like I'm kind of king within my own environment as far as Wrestling Empire is concerned. And I have these sort of real long streaks. And then I got called in to the booker, and they say, you really need to start putting people over. And then the annoying thing was, every single match I had after that point felt like it was a title defense. And I was like, I don't really want to put someone over right now.
Imagine how they feel in real life. It's exactly the same. Why do you think they're all arguing backstage? The drama is exactly the same.
But this is the level of emotion that you've been able to put into this game. And I wish people could just see past some of it. I think if they see it in motion, and they would get it more. Is there anyone on YouTube that you're a particular fan of that does it particularly well, or have you not gone on YouTube to see people playing your game such long form?
Yeah, I appreciate people like Chris Denker who played my games, because and he put a lot of eyeballs on it, put millions of eyeballs on Wrestling Empire as well as some of the older games. And the good thing about it is they do that with I don't bribe anyone to do anything. I'm quite an exception in that regard. Because it is normal to bribe people to do things.
Yeah.
But I refuse to do it because I don't want to muddy the water. I don't want to poison the well. And I don't want to sit there knowing that the only reason he played that game was because I paid him to or bribed him to in some other way. So when people like Chris Denker do play my games and other YouTubers like that, they are legitimately doing it for the love of the game, for the love of their fans, for the love of the channel. For the jokes and New Legacy and people like that. When they do it for charity is even more impressive.
That's who it is. And, Extreme Sumo is New Legacy Inc. That's who that is.
Really?
Absolutely nailed it.
So they entertain a lot of people. They put a lot of eyeballs on the game. They raise a lot of money for charity. And I support all of that. And it's a nice symbiotic relationship. And it's genuine because they're not being paid or bribed in any way to do anything.
I suppose from their point of view, they need to put a video out, and your
Yeah, it's mutual. Yeah,
yeah
I give
your
them content,
platform,
they give me
but it's a
publicity, and
very
round and round we go.
it's a blank canvas and a very wide palette of different things they can choose to put up there. And the good thing about it is you never quite know what's happening next. And
Yeah,
that, in terms of an entertainment on a screen that you're not interacting with, you're just partaking in, there's something really enjoyable about it. And I always think, oh, what happened next? What happens next to Extreme Sumo? I
yeah.
can't wait. And I find I'm as gripped to Extreme Sumo as I am to my own character. The game has been quite honestly a revelation to me, and hope everybody listening now. I mean, we haven't even scraped the surface. You can be interviewed on a podcast. If you're in full roam mode, you go in a hotel to make sure you get a good night's sleep. Quite often, you find someone else in your bed, so that turns into a brawl in the bedroom before you even get your head down. You've got to turn up and show up to the arena at the right time. You've got to go and improve your stats. You've got to work in the gym on the climbing apparatus. You've got to pump weights to build up your physique. You've got to be a generous person backstage in terms of training to keep your attitude up. You've kind of got to agree with the boss to get it in the right place. You can go to the graveyard and attend a funeral of a recently dead legend. You can get seriously wounded and injured in the match and end up in hospital with the option of being addicted to painkillers or steroids. You can go to the airport. You can end up on a plane.
The scary thing is we've only seen a quarter of the things I had planned for this game. This is me working part-time on a 4 out of 10 wrestling game. Imagine how much further I would have taken it if I was working full-time on a critically acclaimed wrestling game. This is us against the odds, uphill, crawling over broken glass with broken legs while people throw slime at us. And we're still getting things done.
What a promo. That was great. I think, I know you wear the 4 out of 10 as a badge of honor, and I'll be honest with you.
I like to have fun with
it. It's kind of insulting, if I'm honest, because I think if people had taken a little bit more time, and I must humbly apologize because I've called it wonky and broken, and this industry kind of lords those words on us, but hopefully I've taken the time to double down on the intricacies of what it is. And the reason why I would use those words is the opening of the freedom that enables you to tell that story, not only on the screen, but within your own mind. And I think that's something that we need to remember is what this game gives us. I want to say...
what I'll say about that is all I ask for is an even playing field, because people will say my games are a buggy, broken mess. But when AEW and WWE release games that are arguably even buggier, because
definitely
people call my games broken because of a few clunky animations, but now we're talking about soul-destroying bugs, the black screen bugs, the truly broken pieces of software. And that kind of language isn't used in the headline of those articles. It's used in the headlines against an indie developer who single-handedly made a game in the car park of a hospital during a pandemic while homeschooling 2 children. That's the guy that gets those headlines. The billionaires get slightly different headlines.
I think the industry is a bit weird in that regard, but I think I have stumbled across ultimately the only wrestling game I will end up probably buying for the rest of my days. I don't see this enjoyment coming in there's the fireworks and the showbiz of an annualized big sports release from WWE or AEW, but they are lacking everything I could ever want. And to harken back to, me walking my dog, it's the video game dream I always wanted, and it's the platform and Pantheon. So keep those updates coming, Matt, please, because I have doubled down on this. I don't want to play another wrestling game because everything, as fancy as the graphics are, as the ray tracing bounces off Triple H's chest, is irrelevant because the story that's being told is dead. The career modes of those games probably peaked in Here Comes the Pain, and they've been a pretty much downward slope since then. And that game at least enabled you to have some freedom of execution over your movement within the wrestling world backstage and the career of that wrestler. Your game, I can take someone from wrestling school, and I only noticed this the other day, you can adjust the in-game clock. So I set it back to the 90s just to watch the chaos unfold. that was, because I did notice that some of the wrestlers were dying or whatnot. So I thought, no, and I want to kind of take this guy through the 90s through to modern day. So he arrives as like a broken veteran, if that makes sense. There's only one game on planet Earth, if you're a wrestling fan, that enables you to do it, and it's Wrestling Empire. What a testament. Now, you said that you built the game in a car park during a pandemic while homeschooling two children. Was that some sort of a release for you in terms of like, oh, I just need to do something? Was that the methodology there?
The facts are that I was in a parking lot of a hospital with two children in the back seat who had to be homeschooled because they can't go to the actual school during the pandemic. And I'm there learning C# so that I can make my first Nintendo game, which is my first Unity game. And to go through that much sacrifice and work, and then to deliver that in January 2021, and for the response to be, this is a buggy broken mess, it's 4 out of 10, that kind of hurt, because I felt it was out of sync with how much work went into it, especially when that was coming at a time when Nintendo fans had nothing. They had been betrayed and neglected by WWE. They'd been betrayed by WWE 2K18. They'd been betrayed by WWE Battlegrounds, and they were about to be betrayed by AEW Fight Forever. And I came into that gap and presented people with an affordable alternative that can load up to 30 characters instantly. And I expected a little bit more enthusiasm than I got, to put it mildly.
But do you think there's a wave now of people that are retrospectively and now understanding exactly what Wrestling Empire is, and there's a sea shift in attitude towards it?
Yeah, I think as far as the public's concerned, that war is over. It had overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. The most positive reviews any wrestling game has ever had on that platform. It's had the most hours played per user on Switch. People have sank between 200 and 300 hours into this game per year.
My most played game on Switch is Wrestling Empire. I got a little stat through from I got a little stat
every
through,
December.
Yeah, and it was there. Oh my goodness gracious me! I've not even had it that long, really. But
so that's been vindication for me. I knew that would be. I made a joke about that from the start. I said, the media are criticizing me now, but I guarantee you, by the end of 2021, this will have the most hours played, etc., etc. And that turned out to be true, because this is a marathon and not a sprint. And the sprinters ran out of breath very quickly, but this is the marathon that has gone on for years. Now this is its fourth year as a Switch game, and it's growing. When have you ever heard of a wrestling game growing? Some games have been released and removed from the store in the time this has been on the store. That's a testament, I think. That's a vindication that you'll never read in a magazine.
Do you think you're going to constantly refine? Because at the moment, unlike those other guys, they do a yearly cycle, drop it, you pay $80 for the new one, as is today's price, and then you play it for a year and they drop it, and you pay another $80 and you play it for a year and they drop it. Are you going to, at any point in time, take everything you've learned through the upgrades on Wrestling Empire, and possibly we might see a Wrestling Empire Revenge? Because you can't call it 2. You got to call it something like Revenge.
The bad news is I'm never going to put myself through this process again. That was it. But the good news is I'm never going to stop working on what we have. So if you like what we have, the good news is I'm going to add more bells and whistles to it. But I will never put myself through the process of building a wrestling game again from scratch.
A collective sigh of sadness, but a collective triumphal cheer that I currently now own the best wrestling game ever made, and it's only ever going to get better. So
best I can do for you.
Yeah, thank you. Very kind, very generous. It's just for me, my personal updates. I mean, I could wax lyrical about the things that I would like to see, but I'm sure you're bombarded by millions of sort of more renowned people.
Give me one. Give me your number one. What's the best one? The most important one.
My most important one. Oh my God, this feels very indulgent. But I talked at the top about. It's quite a big change, I suppose. I want to be able to get in the car and not drive it, but cut scene to the next arena. And therefore, if there was a way of reworking the street so it felt like I was, because you've incorporated the weather again,
yeah.
where does this stop? You've incorporated the weather and all that sort of stuff. So like an alternate town. So you arrive and you feel like you're somewhere different, or you get on a plane and you get off and you're somewhere different.
Well, the good news is we are going to get vehicles that those cars are going to be passed back to wrestling eventually. It's just the destination. So you could convince yourself that you're doing that tour, you're doing that road trip, but realistically, the idea that there would be a different town on the other end of that is because I'm working so hard just to build this one city. The idea that there would be a different city in Japan is just I could tweak little things to create the illusion of a different environment, different signs, different textures, but structurally it would be very similar.
Like I say, I mean, I'm a guy who can barely work Excel, so I understand that what you do on a with these regular updates is beyond anything I could even imagine. And the fact that you've come this far with it is a testament on your own as well, is a testament to everything that's gone on. I think I could speak to you for hours and hours and hours, Matt, but one last question. Who do you play through Wrestling Empire as? And do you have a favorite? Obviously, you mentioned Bret the Hitman Hart being the excellence of execution on the way in, but who do you think who is your character at the moment in Wrestling Empire, and what's the story there?
Have you seen a character called Score Benz in the wrestling school? He's got like a half-shaved head. I always choose him for some reason. I can't really explain why.
Okay.
But an interesting story behind the star character. You know that Whack-Axe guy with the pink top?
Yes.
That was an accident. I accidentally created him 20 years ago in 3D Studio Max because when you missing a texture, it's pink. So that my body texture had disappeared, and so he showed up as pink with these black shorts, and I thought, oh, he could be our version of Bret Hart. He's our pink and black attack, and the rest is history. I just kind of sometimes, these random characters will be thrown up by the early version of the game. And my brain will get so used to seeing them that I'm quite fond of them, even though other people might think they look quite grotesque. I'm fond of. So there's a guy called Worry Cousin. There's a guy called Worry Cousin in the wrestling school. He's got this strange yellow and white shorts and a strange purple bandana. And that was just a randomized character from one of the very first builds of Wrestling Empire. And I just couldn't be bothered to change it. And I saw him so often, I couldn't bear to see him disappear. And it's just strange little things like that dictate who becomes famous in a game played by millions of people 3 years later.
You and again, I've got sidetracked again because you're in your own game, aren't you? As a wrestling promoter.
Oh yeah, just as a joke. He doesn't have very good stats, so it's not exactly a flattering self-portrait. But
you have caused me.
I don't even look like that in real life.
I know.
He wears a hat.
He does, a cowboy hat. You have caused me quite the drama.
I never wear a hat
during my wrestling career. It's like, right. What now? I'm back in here. You want 200 quid for that thing? You want me to up my attitude? Why, Matt? Why?
I think that's why I did it. It's like, if we can't have online play, I can indirectly be part of your world. So I can indirectly be part of everybody's game and be the guy that's creating trouble for them or otherwise. So that's an interesting little twist.
You certainly do that. I think you're probably, in my playthroughs, you've been the most maniacal of Federation bosses I have ever met.
Absolutely. I think he looks like this. He looks like this in Wrestling Empire.
Yeah, for the audio listeners, Matt's pulling his best M. Dickey face, and that's got my rage. That's triggered my rage gland. I just want to smash you through the office window as retaliation for another extreme request. I could go on, but I want to be respectful of your time. As fans of the show know, I want to. Well, hang on. Let's go back to this. I just want to be truly thankful that you've taken the time out of your busy schedule. The update's just dropped. It's the anniversary of the game. You probably should be pulling party poppers and eating a prawn vol au vent or three in celebration, but you decided to sit down with a sub-average podcast and give us the time of
No,
day.
thank you for spending this anniversary with me, because it's 3 years to the day that this game came out, and your enthusiasm for it has made me feel even better about the day.
Wow. Well, I am honoured by that. Like I say, it's some sort of bizarre fever dream we've shared along the way. And the fact that I'm now looking at you and you're real means to me that this is real. And I have been playing Wrestling Empire, and it's not some sort of weird dream that I created many years ago. To everybody out there, if they want to find you on the socials, where would they go?
Just at mdicky.com, spelled out DOTCOM, on Twitter and YouTube. And that's about it. I don't really do Facebook anymore, except for a huge announcement, because that's kind of dying out. And I don't do anything else. Oh, even my own website, mdicky.com, is a bit quiet, but it's a little museum of what was accomplished in the past. You can find all the independent download links of various things throughout the past 3 decades of making games.
Unbelievable. You live the life I always wanted to live. Those that can make games do, those that can't talk about them on a podcast, hence why I'm here and you're there. Thank you
for doing so.
Before we let you go, I must ask you, we've asked you what you had been playing. What are you hoping to play for this next gaming week?
I'm getting back into Civilization 5. Every year, one of my little treats that I look forward to is carving out the time to play something like Civilization 5, because I don't have time throughout the year to play such a time-consuming game. So it's a little treat I give myself at the end of a busy year.
Well, that's nice to know, and thank you for sharing that with us. I must say thank you once again. I'm probably the person that thanks people a million times, but I just want to say thank you so much. I hope you have the very best day as an anniversary, and you get lucky with Wrestling Empire today. and going forward, I hope that the game continues to gain the traction that it deserves. I hope there's going to be some critical reappraises of the game, and we all change our, let's just say, let's all change our vocabulary a little bit better to better understand and represent the product that you're doing. I've had to adjust my own vocabulary to say that it's this open palette that allows us to do literally whatever you could possibly imagine. And with that comes botched moves, which is it's all part of it. That adds to the realism element. And if anyone's sitting on the fence, they need to get off of it. Immediately get some splinters in their backside and get this downloaded on their Switch and get playing it. It's not just the best wrestling game on Switch. I'm going to go out there and say it's the best wrestling game ever. And with these updates, keep coming. Is there anything else that you want to impart before we go? Is there anything that you want to share or tell people out there?
Well, I just want to thank all the other people, such as yourself, who have given the game a chance, because independent games wouldn't be anything without independent minds to give them a chance. And I am grateful, because it's rare. We've seen every single voice has been raised up against me to say, don't play this game. So the voices that do say you should play this game, and the people that are brave enough to try it, and the people that are brave enough to leave a positive review and put themselves in the firing line, I'm eternally grateful to those individuals, and they're the bricks that built the empire.
Wow. Well, I'm glad to consider myself part of your NWO clique, if you'll have me. And my life has truly been blessed by the arrival of the game, so thank you for that. And I guess that's all we have time for this week, listeners. As always, thank you for your time. I look forward to the pleasure of speaking to you again next week. Until then, happy gaming. And remember, there's nothing wrong with being given the unofficial controller. It's what you do with it that counts. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.